Everybody, hello once again. Here we have another opportunity to talk to one of the soloists who is such a familiar presence in our concerts in Manchester and a very, very distinguished singer in his own right all over the world. And not, as you're going to find out, just a singer. Roddy Williams has been one of my great collaborators for many years now, and I look forward so much to doing more with him in the future in a variety of different roles. So let us welcome Roddy Williams. Roddy, it's really lovely that you've spared the time to do this with me. And it's great for our patrons and our loyal supporters, and perhaps even members of the orchestra, to have an opportunity to learn a bit about you and not just your wonderful voice, which is, of course, supremely beautiful. And you're a great, great artist. I'm sorry to make you blush, but you are. And I'd love to ask you, was it always clear to you that you'd be a singer, or weren't, I'm guessing now, but weren't there some like alternatives you could have gone into?
Yes, very much so. I thought I was going to be a classroom music teacher. I think I was. It's partly because I lacked the imagination to see that a career in music making existed, and partly because the message I was getting from everybody around me, my family, my school teachers at university as well, it was gearing me towards a teaching career, which is something I enjoy teaching. But sometimes when you're at a function after a concert and the person next to you turns to you and says, what do you do during the day? What's your day job? I would have been one of those people. I hadn't worked out as a young man, as a teenager anyway, that this existed as a career. It just sort of people magically seem to make music.
Have you actually ever been asked that question? Now,
oh yes, yes. And I can be very generous in my response to that question because I know that I was that person, and until actually it was as an undergraduate I saw some of the other people in the choir I was a part of. I was a choral scholar at Magdalen in Oxford, and I saw some of the others go into the singing profession as a career, and I thought, oh, you can do that. What? And people will pay you to do that, and it turned out that was so. I did teach for 3 years, and then rather unexpectedly, to both my head of department and frankly to me, I handed in my notice in order to try and do this singing thing. But I've got a PGCE somewhere, I suspect in a closet somewhere. I went and studied for a year after university as a postgrad, the teaching of children in schools, so that I had, I was echt. I had a certificate.
Oh, right.
I have to say, wholly ineffective. But after more years teaching, I might have learnt how to do it.
I've always thought it would be incredibly difficult, very tiring and very wearing. And I admire teachers so much that they have the patience and the application. I have one musical antecedent, and he was the organist of Manchester Cathedral. And his name was Norman Cocker. He was my grandmother's brother.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And it was clear as a very young boy that he had musical talent. They put him in for a voice trial to Magdalen College, Oxford.
Oh, yes.
And he got a place. And the problem was that his mother, my great-great-grandmother, couldn't afford all the details of the school uniform. They came from Sarby Bridge in Yorkshire, children had rickets. I mean, it was a really difficult childhood, quite a lot of children. And so she apparently, my grandmother told me this, got hold of his old school cap and tore off the old school badge of his primary school.
Yes.
And invented the fleur-de-lis that was the emblem of Magdalen, that it was rather poorly achieved. And so when he got to Oxford, very soon he got the nickname of Cauliflower. Because the fleur-de-lis did not look as if it came from a high-quality garden. That's why my one musical antecedent. But Roddy, if you narrowly escaped a teaching career, greatly to all our benefit, how did you find the way to become a professional singer? Were you studying at the time with somebody wonderful?
Not especially, but no. At the point where I made the decision that I should try the musical career, I wasn't studying with anybody particular. And it was having left teaching and having gone to London, sort of throw my cap into the ring with all the others, that I found David Pollard, who still teaches at the Guildhall School of Music.
Yes.
And I went to David privately, and then he said to me afterwards, after a few years of learning with him, he said, if you come to the Guildhall as a postgraduate, you can have weekly lessons rather than just one every now and again, and your improvement will be much faster. So I went to the Guildhall. I was probably about 28 or 29 rather than much younger when I went to the Guildhall, and I picked the opera course because it was 2 years and it sounded like an awful lot of fun. They did stagecraft, they did combat skills, movement. They taught you prosthetics and things like that. I just thought it sounded great fun. I hadn't actually worked out that I could be on stage and act. It just happened to be something I really enjoyed when I got there. So,
how interesting. Was that a big journey for you, Roddy, coming into London? I mean, you live now in North Oxfordshire, don't you? Was that where you were born and brought up?
It's South Warwickshire to be we're just almost within sight of the Oxfordshire border. But no, this is not where I grew up. I was a Barnet boy, North London. And then when I was teaching down in Tiffin School, I was right the other end of the Northern Line, right down in Morden and beyond. So any journey into London, the centre of town, seems to take as long as it does for me now in Warwickshire. It's one of those strange things, getting on the tube and you read a couple of books and you find you're only at Clapham Junction or whatever it is, but just one of those. But yeah.
So when you've done this course at the Guildhall, did you always want to be on the stage and sing opera rather than concert and leader?
It was such a mixed bag. No, I was attracted to opera because my mother, in particular, loves opera, I should say. And she, as I was growing up, she used to cook to Puccini. She had all those Callas recordings, the Calais and Callas recordings, which she would put on, and she would banish everyone else from the kitchen so that she could sing along with Callas. She'd be just a tiny bit sharper than Callas on the top notes. And
well,
so
that's an achievement, as I remember.
Yeah, it did.
But isn't always absolutely in the middle of the note.
There or thereabouts is, yeah. But it was, that's where I picked up an education in opera, because I was, as a choral scholar, as a treble before that, and as a choral scholar, I was, of course, a sight reading machine. And it was only when I got to the Guildhall that I bumped into people who some of them didn't read music. And one chap I'm thinking of actually was dyslexic and had to be taught scores note by note by a pianist. But when he was taught them, they went in, into his heart somewhere else. And people could make me cry by the way they sang with such passion and such commitment. And of course, just singing the Magnificat and Nunc Dimittis every day, no one had ever made me cry when they performed. So that was a real education.
Yes, it's funny, isn't it, that the singers whose musicianship is quite prosaic and tricky for them and a great effort.
Yeah.
By the time they've learned something, it's there forever. That is the way it will always be.
Yeah. Yes.
I remember to a recording session a long, long time ago, when Pavarotti had agreed to sing the role of Macduff, comparatively for him, not an important role. And he'd obviously never done it before. In Verdi's opera, Macbeth. And at the battle at the end, they confront each other. And of course, Macduff famously kills Macbeth. But when he calls out to Macbeth and recognizes him and challenges him, it's a line that he couldn't get right.
Yeah.
And at the session I was at, there were 5 people at the side and in front of him, helping him to come in at the right place.
Yeah.
It was not one of the roles that he'd had drummed into him.
Yes.
I mean, of course, was one of the greatest singers who've ever lived.
Yes.
But fundamental musicianship and the confidence that comes with
that
was not his bag.
Yeah.
And poor guy, he was so nervous. And every time it came nearer and nearer, and people started prompting him and shouting, no, Luciano, wait, and giving the things. He just didn't get it right. So, when Pavarotti's learned something, he really knows it.
Yes.
Hard thing for us who come from that ecclesiastical background is that we never know anything by heart, Now,
Yeah.
was that a problem for you when you started to memorize?
Yes, it was. It's a completely different muscle. In fact, the first audition I did for the Guildhall, the first year I auditioned, I took along all the music and popped the pile of 10 scores on the top of the piano and said, what would you like to hear first, my Italian aria or my French song or whatever? And I seem to remember singing Welch ein Augenblick from Fidelio. Ah, welch ein Augenblick. And they all looked at me rather quizzically, and I popped that back. And at the end, as I was going out, she turned to me. She said, "Mr. Williams, do you find it hard to learn music?" And I said, "No," because I think I read that all correctly. Was there I didn't make any mistakes, did I? It's a matter of honour. And it was on the way out that the pianist turned to me and said, "I think she meant from memory." I don't think it was written on the form that you should do these things from memory, because it was so understood in that world that people would sing from memory that they'd left it off. So I didn't get anywhere. And the following year I returned and sang as much as I could remember. And I'm afraid to this day, the memory slip is the thing that makes me more nervous than anything else. It's a feature of my performances, I would say. But at least I've taught myself that if you just lose a word here and there, have a little bit of a mumble, it's not the end of the world. That's the main thing.
No, nobody else notices.
Yeah.
And as your great colleague Graham Clark taught me when we worked together many, many, many years ago, put it behind you, on to the next one. So you wanted to do opera and you weren't quite sure how to start. Did you start doing wonderful lieder recitals early on?
Yes, I wonder how I got into that, because it's not so obvious, is it? Some of these things. Now you ask the question, I think back and I can't remember particularly how that part of me began. I had a singing teacher at Magdalen College, the lovely Janet Edmonds, who's actually lives about 10 miles away, just outside of Banbury.
How handy.
Yes, exactly. Emergency measures. She's quite aged now, and she's moved from a little village into a care home just outside Banbury. But we trade letters now and again, and she was tasked with keeping the choral scholars healthy, and we would turn up. I speak for myself here, appallingly hungover to these singing lessons, and she would push music our way and said, "Have you tried singing this?" I remember doing the 4 serious songs, the Brahms with her, quite a bit of Brahms actually, because that's what she loved to sing. All sorts of repertoire that I would never have come across. Du bist die Ruhe by this person called Schubert. All sorts of, he'll never make it. All sorts of wonderful material, and actually it's because she was so enthusiastic about it that I took that on later into life. There were these schemes, the NFMS, National Federation of Music Societies, which is now Making Music. They used to run a scheme in conjunction with ESSO, I think it was, who would fund soloists to go around and sing for choral societies everywhere, and music societies. So I learnt how to put a recital program together and how to sing it quite literally the length and breadth of the United Kingdom. So many of the places I've been to as a young man were through that scheme. And when you see into people's eyes, you'll see whether the material you're singing, whether you're putting it across well. And of course, I remember that from my teaching days. You can definitely see in their eyes. And you can also tell whether you're pacing things well from whether they're asleep or not. It's very clear and easy to judge. So that's how that must have been how my recital career grew.
Roddy, the idea of going the length and breadth of the British Isles seems rather tricky nowadays, doesn't it? Do young singers now have that opportunity? I doubt it. Are there so many music societies still?
I'm in contact with quite a few. There used to be a handbook, the British Music Yearbook, I think it was, quite a bit of a Bible, and there used to be lists of them that you could send your CV to, knowing it would probably end up in their waste paper basket, but at least you were doing something. I remember doing that very specifically. A friend now, an acquaintance of mine who runs the music at Leamington Spa, recently found an old flyer that I'd sent him, cold calling as was, and sent it back to me. He's not one for litter, is he? So, but
Yeah,
for the people nowadays, of course, it's all on the internet.
yeah.
Such information, but you have to find it. I hope there are lists for these such places, and I'm thinking of places in Morpeth up in Northumberland, and singing down in Truro at the art at a music society down there, and east and west, these tiny, well, not so tiny, but these interested music societies.
Mm.
I remember once being picked up from the station and being driven to the concert, and they would tell me what they always tell me. They would say, "I'm so sorry we haven't sold many tickets for this recital. We had some string quartet last week playing Acres of Beethoven, and that sold very well, but vocal recitals never sell. It doesn't matter to me because the fee's the same, so that's okay." And then the person said to me on this particular journey, he said, "Of course, last week we had last month or so we had Stephen Isserlis, and we've discovered him. We had Stephen Isserlis before he was Stephen Isserlis." So there is a hope, at least, that they are trying to find younger singers in the hope that they will then turn into
The stars of tomorrow. Yeah, that's very important, because without that ease of experience, you lack the on the road experience, don't you? Going
definite.
to places and trying out and learning how to communicate, and
Yes,
as you say, watching the public and learning from their reactions and how to build a program,
yes, yes.
sort of thing. Well, it's great that you had that experience. So when did you first sing in opera?
Around the time of the Guildhall, just a few years either side of it, I began to dabble, and it seemed to be La Boheme that came up an awful lot. I was recently in contact actually with the first opera company who actually employed me. There was a team called Opera Brava, and they're based out of Walton-on-Thames, I think. And we did La Boheme with 7 people and a piano, and we would tour it to places like the Leisure Centre in Staines. That's definitely one of the venues. I remember we would set up the set, and the pianist would be just underneath. I remember seeing as we performed the electric scoreboard at the other end of the hall, and just worried that however high we sang, we never seemed to make any impressions on it. There was never.
But now, wait a minute. In Boheme, there are 2 roles that you could have sung. Which one were you doing?
I was Marcello for that actually, which
Right.
I hugely enjoyed. Gosh, I so love doing that. And the curious thing is that because the E&O is just beginning their drive-in live opera at the end of next month.
At Ali Pali, yeah.
Exactly, and that's once again is the role that's come my way. It's just good. It's great. It's been a feature. I have sung Chouinard many times. That wonderful John Copley, isn't it? Is it John Copley?
Yeah.
His masterpiece production at Covent Garden. I was in that twice as Chouinard.
Mm.
And Chouinard, I've sung Chouinard up in Scotland as well, Scottish opera. And the thing is, when I explain to people that I'm in La Boheme, they say, "Oh, you're singing Marcello?" And I say, "No, not him." Oh, you're singing the one with the coat aria? No, not him either. I'm the other one, the 4th one,
You could say the musician.
the musician.
And I know how to kill a parrot.
Yes, exactly.
Well, of course, it's an irrepressible opera, isn't it? It's always fresh. And I'm sure we've both been involved in it for many, many times. And I still love it.
Yes.
I think it's a brilliant piece. So what happened after that? I mean, did you start doing Mozart operas, for instance?
Yes, the first opera that I did with a national company was the Marriage of Figaro at Opera North.
Right.
I suppose, therefore, that the Guildhall was a turning point for me in just studying how 2 things. First of all, studying the whole concept of opera and doing things in memory and being a character and everything that entails, particularly 1 or 2 of the members of the drama department as opposed to the singing department. That was very interesting. And then also the connection with outside companies, with the network. It's like jumping ship from the choral world into the opera world. And it's an entirely different set of people. So I went up to Leeds with whom, again, over the years, I've had a wonderful, long relationship. And we did a production of The Marriage of Figaro. It's fun.
And which role were you?
I was the Count in that. Again, I love it. The thing about typecasting in opera is that if people see you as a bubbly, irrepressible person, I'm just imagine that some people might see me as bubbly and irrepressible. They might think Papageno, perhaps. They might think, if I'm really lucky, Billy Budd, perhaps. But in terms of the bad guys in opera, and of course the baritones play wonderful bad guys. I love doing Don Giovanni at Opera North, for example. And I have once ever sung Scarpia down at St. Endelion, down at a small church, small orchestra. And the chance to be in and amongst the audience. When it comes to the Te Deum at the end, I was standing right in the audience. So the acoustics are on my side, the balancer's on my side there.
Yeah.
And I learnt more from singing that opera than any other role. I mean, in terms of about singing, that opera brought me on. It was fantastic.
And so, when you say it taught you about singing, what do you mean by that? Do you mean specifically singing this great big Italian, verismo style? Yeah. Because it's quite specific, that, isn't it?
Yes, there are some composers, and they are often the great Italian composers who write roles almost like a singing lesson. Verdi, I'm sure, his markings are so specific. I've not sung Verdi on stage, by the way, but his markings are so specific. It's as though he's standing beside you when you're practicing and coaching you, saying no, piano, pianissimo, and then where he puts his tenuto markings, it's so specific. And the music he's writing, and Puccini is writing, and one or two other composers writing, is so lyrical for a voice like mine that I just improve by doing so. It's almost like singing bel canto exercises. And similarly, there are other composers who don't write. They write percussively, and often a lot of contemporary opera composers, but that's a different subject. And then you look at the role in terms of survival. Just you look at it and think, how am I going to make it as far as the interval, let alone to the end of the piece? And then it was a question of boxing clever,
Yeah, no, absolutely. Now, Roddy, when you started all this, there's one aspect that you haven't mentioned at all, which I think is always so interesting. How did you turn your mind and your energy to all these foreign languages?
It's strange that, because I wasn't a talented linguist at school at all. My mother, incidentally, was a French teacher, part-time French teacher. Is one of the things she offered. So I was in a good set for French, but in the bottom set for German. I didn't have the logical brain to keep up. But I have a musician's ear, so I can copy.
Mimic.
Yes, exactly. Which puts me at a slight disadvantage, because if I turn up in another country, another European country, with a slang of language, they think when they hear me order a taxi that I must, he must be fluent. That's, they say, oh, your accent is very good. You speak very well. And then I crush around in the grammar. And of course, my vocabulary in every language I speak is 200 to 300 years too out of date, I can rhyme in a variety of languages, something that's very useful if I have a memory lapse. But I make my German friends laugh. There's that wonderful line that Pilate says to Christus in the John Passion when he comes in from the crowd. He turns to him and says, "Von wannen bist du?" He says, and I inadvertently once said this to a German, just so where are you from, mate? Sort of, and so, von wannen bist du? This is, so whither art thou? It's howling with laughter.
It's very funny, isn't it? I started in East Berlin, That was the first place that I worked in German. And so all my studying of German romantic opera, I was, clutching at German straws.
Yeah.
And and I was doing Madame Butterfly with them, and I was trying to learn the language as well as the piece. And in desperation, when somebody came in wrong or something like that, and I wanted to say, be careful, I grabbed hold of a phrase that Albrecht sings threateningly in Rheingold, and I said, Habacht! And of course the whole place fell about, because you'd never say that. Oh dear. But that's how you learn, isn't it?
Yes.
You've got to be prepared to make fools of ourselves in order to learn.
Yes.
So what role are you singing at the moment then, Roddy?
Well, let's see. Well, Marcello has come up. When Ian had to call off rehearsals when the pandemic struck and everything was finished, I was halfway through a run of Madame Butterfly, and singing Sharpless, which is a role I've done once in Italian elsewhere, and then in English here, and that's not a great cut out and keep role, that I wish I'd sung. For me, the glorious thing about that role is being very, very close to whoever's singing Butterfly on stage. I have the best position in the house, and Natalia Romani was singing here, and all I had to do was sit and read her a letter, and she would have me on the verge of tears kind of every night. And when she makes that extraordinary entrance, this is the Anthony Minghella production.
I've done it, yeah.
Yes. And so you from your position in the pit, you would look up and see this sort of vision of red, and then a silhouette come up over the backdrop, right at the back. And she makes this extraordinary cinematic entrance. And all I have to do, I don't have to think about anything as Sharpless. I don't have much to sing at that point. I've done most of my singing for the evening. All I have to do is stand there and watch a glorious colleague sing her socks off. It's fantastic.
Yeah, it's very beautiful, isn't it? Very beautiful piece.
Yes, yeah.
I think he wrote his piece. He thought it was his best, not his favourite. He thought the one about nuns was his favourite.
Gosh, yes.
It's extraordinary, isn't it? His sister was a nun, and he went and played the opera through to all the nuns in this little convent, and they all cried their eyes out. Yeah. But it's interesting, you just touched on something that so many people want to know the answer to. When you say you sang Sharpless in Italian and then over here in English, what did it feel like getting it into English, getting it into another language?
That is an interesting question. It's a difficult process if the translator is fiercely protective of their work. Because it's interesting, when you sing something in original language, no one thinks for a moment of changing the original text. But as soon as it's in translation, you kind of feel it's up for grabs. And this is David Parry's translation of Madame Butterfly, and it's gone through one or two changes over the years. So I've sent a list of corrections, and it feels like a sort of mosaic. All of us begin to add bits to it, and because I like to think of myself sometimes as a composer, sometimes inadvertently on stage as well. I would like to think that if Puccini were alive and part of the process, he would look at a phrase and say, well, change the rhythm. Don't. If you've got this slightly awkward English text because it fits the moment but doesn't fit the notes, well, change the notes. I'm sure everybody was practical about that. Bach, even in the Passions, which we sing in English so often, just change the notes, just change the rhythms.
Yeah, this is such a misunderstanding, isn't it, in so many people's minds. But then not everybody who translates is going to have the courage and the confidence to know how to do that.
Yeah.
And one of the biggest translations I ever did was Parsifal. And I did it with Richard Stokes, who I'm sure you know.
Yes.
He came over to Chicago, where I was conducting, and we spent hours sitting side by side. And he would say, the best line here is the following line.
Yes.
How should we make it fit the music? And I would make the changes.
Yes.
I'm in charge of saying, right, we do this, we tie that together, we invent the music to fit the words. Now, you can't do that with every style. You can't do that with Verdi, certainly the beginning to the middle period. Perhaps with Otello you could more easily, but it's pretty tricky.
Yes.
And that needs great skill. But it's so important, isn't it, Roddy, that when you all sing in translation, and I first conducted this Butterfly in German.
Oh, yes, yeah.
In East Berlin. it's so important that the lines are good lines to deliver and to be understood. There's no point in having a really poor line and then saying, you see, we haven't changed the music at all. Because, as you said, Puccini would certainly encourage us to change the music. And all my experience of working with living composers is exactly that. Above all, they want the audience to be involved and understand. And Verdi did too. You know, he wanted his pieces to be understood. And, you know, it's a very, very difficult. I've spent more time translating operas into English than I have conducting them. But for you as a singer, it's, of course, there are vocal considerations, and an English line might not feel the same as the original line, but you can still make it work if you're determined to, can't you?
Absolutely, and it's a question. It's a question of being able to feel that that's what my character would say, and that's how I would say it.
Believe in it, absolutely.
Yes.
But now you Billy Budd wonderfully well up with Opera North. How was that as an experience, singing an original English libretto?
That was everything I hoped it would be. I mean, I'm a huge Britten fan, both as a singer and as a composer. In fact, I find him intimidating as a composer. So, and I'm a huge fan of Billy Budd as a piece. So it happened to be my sister-in-law, Orpha Phelan, who was directing, and we had talked about the piece as Britten opera nerds. Just to say that she met my brother when they both independently came to Albert Herring. So that's when they met. So that was some time ago. So we talked about Billy Budd as a thought for some time, and she sort of hung on for me to be in this particular production, because, you know, I'm stretching Billy Budd's youth. You know, there's only so much black hair dye a man can wear of an evening. So it's only in 2016. It's only a few years ago that I did this. I'm so glad I did. And I'd wanted particularly to explore the slightly darker side of Billy. I think when I've had a chance to play really wonderfully bad people, like Tarquinius and the Rape of Lucretia, I've always wanted to examine the light in them, rather than play a caricature, a cardboard cutout. And similarly with Billy, he can come across as an angel, and when he comes across as an angel, that can be a bit dull, I think. I've seen one or two productions of Billy Budd where Captain Vere is an immense presence, and Claggett is an immense presence, and Billy Budd has been a kind of a hole, a cipher in the middle, and I didn't want to fall down that hole. So I worked quite hard to explore the full range of him, his temper and his lust for violence. He can be a violent man. He has a wonderful ability to see the good in everyone and everything. So that is kind of naivety, not being able to spot it. And I noticed that he stammers when people let him down. When people don't behave the way they say they will, and of course that is ultimately Claggett. He thinks he's getting on really well with Claggett. He thinks Claggett's really impressed with him. When he discovers that was a front and that there's something lurking underneath, he can't talk, and that's when he hits him. So,
Roddy, just going on from that, what roles do you dream of singing one day? I mean, what do you have? Oh, perhaps in another 5 or 10 years I could do this, or, you know, do you have a wish list?
Not especially, because unfortunately for me, the wish list was for so long it was Billy Budd and Onegin. I wanted to do those two, and I did them both in the same year. I was slightly flummoxed by that, because I came out the other side and said, "Oh, right, kind of what's next?" There are some roles that I didn't realise I was going to enjoy so much. I loved singing Olivier in Capriccio. I really enjoyed doing that. So,
is it a good? It's not a very good opera, though, is it?
Well, we had a terrific production. This is in Grange Park, as was with Stephen Metcalfe, and he had a wonderful idea about it, and it was tremendous fun to be in. It could be like English madrigals. It could be that we on stage were having an absolute ball, and the theatre is full of people wondering when it's going to get to the nice bit at the end. You know. That's entirely possible.
It's a very long wait.
Yes, it is. Particularly when the chaps come in and sweep the stage before the prompter. That's
Yeah,
yeah. I'd be getting out of costume then and waiting in the wings for the that's I
yeah.
think. But I've got on the side in my music room just next door. I've got Arabella there to have a little look at Mandruka, for example, something that David Pollard has been banging on at me about for almost a decade now. And I have to say, even with lockdown, at the time it's been afforded me with lockdown, I haven't got round to having a look at the whole opera, let alone the role. So it's not something I know well.
Act 3. That's what you've got to look at.
Lovely. End of
That's
Act 3.
very heavy.
Let's put it on the list. Yep. Put it on the list.
Well, it's got very, very beautiful music in it, but the role has fantastic human visceral quality, of course, but a very big range. So there's nothing that you've always yearned to do apart from those two operas.
My parents, particularly my mother, who grew up on Puccini, she made a gradual life change, and they are now into Wagner. Before all this this lockdown started, they were regularly going around the world wherever they could find it to see ring cycles. So I don't think I necessarily got a ring cycle. I did sing Donna once at E&O when Paul Daniel was getting them, learning them, shall we say, learning them in order to put them on stage with Philip Lloyd. So I sang it in concert once. But I think Wolfram in Tannhäuser might be something. I, of course, had my ear open when Christian Gerhardt sang that at Covent Garden and ran away with notices. Leader singer in Wagner opera,
Yeah.
kind of ran the headlines. I thought, make a note of that. So, like I say, the roles that are on the lyrical end for a baritone, even Posa in Don Carlos is something that I could imagine. I made my debut with the Royal Opera under Bernard Haitink. I sang the Herald to the King in Don Carlo. He's got 8 bars unaccompanied.
I know.
You remember? So I can't even say that I sang with the Royal Opera Orchestra and chorus.
But you could, if you sang it in tune, which I'm sure you did, and so many people don't, you could say, I made my debut in tune.
Yes, yes.
But now, Roddy, the singing lark gives you fantastic different experiences all over the world in the theatre and the concert hall, and we've shared some of them in Manchester. But it's not the only golf club in your bag. You mentioned that you like to think of yourself as a composer. I think that's very, very disarming of you. How much music have you actually written?
Well, I do. I have a lot more than I thought, actually, as part of the process of putting things together in being at home and sorting through all the old scores. There is more than I had imagined. I've got an awful lot of songs, as you can imagine, but actually more choral music than songs. And
when did you start then? How old were you when you first started writing?
I wrote it as a boy. I think my first composition, Opus 1, could easily be Mouse's Dance, or that might be Opus 1A, because I wrote something beforehand called Black and White Clash, the notes on the keyboard, because I inadvertently got my clefs wrong. And Mouse's Dance in the original urtext is this sort of quite modern contemporary piece which just doesn't sound quite right. And I only mention that because quite recently my 2 nephews played an arrangement of Mouse's Dance because my younger brother had got hold of the music during lockdown. They recorded it and played it for me on violin and cello, which was just rather sweet. So I was probably their age, 7, 8, 9.
Wow!
And the music that I wrote, the 2 bits I've still got there, was functional in a Hindemith sort of way. I've got a book full of trios for descant recorders, 3 descant recorders. My younger brother, my father, and myself. And I seem to remember the overtones of the 3 descant recorders in a small study. They were almost more audible than the notes of the descant recorders.
So why didn't you become a composer full time?
I haven't got a particularly good answer for that, but I was never certain that I had anything particular to say. And I mentioned Benjamin Britten being intimidating as a composer.
Yeah.
So I think I was properly musically woken when I went to the cinema once as a young lad, maybe 10, 11, 12, something like that. And the short film before the main feature was all about glass blowing. And there was one bit where they were blowing glass. Who knows, they might have used the whole of the variations on Frank Bridge for the soundtrack, or bits of it. But the bit that got me was the funeral march, with the high strings screaming way at the top, and extraordinary ostinato every now and again. And the hairs on the back of my neck are rising now at the memory of it. It's a piece that suddenly just hit me here, and so almost ever since then, when I hear or take part in a piece by Britten, specifically him, I find his inspiration and his orchestration and his technique so intimidating that I'm inclined to sit on my hands. However, when, as does happen, I am performing a music by a somewhat lesser composer, I can find that actually very inspiring, and think, well, they've made it. They're in print, and we remember them enough for us to be, singing this piece today, sight reading it straight to CD or whatever, and I don't tend to compose for the sheer hell of it. I haven't got enough time anymore. So I compose now when people ask me, and people keep asking.
Well, that's wonderful. That's wonderful. And it's lovely that you still find a place for it in your life, and it enables you to write music for people who you know and admire.
Yes, that's entirely right. And of course, they will then do it, which is very sweet.
Yeah.
I do give them out, by the way. I do allow them. If they don't like it, they don't have to do it.
No. I remember when I wrote music at school, I was very good at doing the opening. I had a lot of lovely ideas for the gesture. And then I'd think, now how's it going to end? And I used to do a fantastically brilliant and effective loud ending.
Yes.
I thought, now how am I going to put anything between the two? And that very often defeated me. I found it very difficult.
Yeah.
But I wrote a little bit when I was a teenager. Nothing. So this whole profession of ours is so vulnerable, isn't it? And we're all living through a time that is very uncertain. How do you cope with that worry with your family? I mean, you've got a wonderful family there. Do you try and keep spirited? Do you have bad days? How does it work for you?
I think I am naturally an optimistic person. And there's a touch of the Billy Budd, seeing the ability to see the good in a situation and in people. Yes, I think I would know that about myself. And I have, of course, like a lot of people, searched for the positive in this situation. Even the fact that I was working so often beforehand, and thinking in the back of my mind, I need to build spaces into my diary so that I can stop for a bit, so that I don't burn out or do. I don't think I was in danger of burning out yet. I hope not, but I knew it was something that could come. And enough people, from my lovely agent, whom we share, and my lovely wife, whom we don't, and all sorts of people, singing teachers, saying to me, Roddy, stop from time to time. Do less. And the implication being, do what you do better. I added that bit for myself. I worked that out. That was the message that was coming my way. And then this extraordinary pause happened globally for at least 2 months, and before I started doing anything again. And I don't know if you felt this, but it was 2.5 months before I felt butterflies in my stomach again. Before I did something at the Wigmore Hall in the middle of June, I hadn't felt nervous
Mm.
so long.
Mm.
That was quite an intriguing thought.
It's interesting, Roddy, isn't it? That the concept of nerves coming out so quickly from your memory.
Mm.
Are you implying that for you, you think nerves are a good thing?
The problem the problem is that I've said so often, particularly to students, when they say, "Do you get nervous, Mr. Williams?" And I say, "Yes," and I say, "Nerves are important. Nerves are a good thing." I tell them because it shows that you're not blasé. The day when you start performing and you don't feel anything at all is definitely a moment to have a pause. The problem is, like a lot of things you say to students, I'm not utterly sure I believe it. Only in that when I get nervous before a job, it's that nerve. I can talk myself into a mistake. I can talk myself into a word lapse, a memory lapse, or just what I describe still as a senior moment. And that's not so useful. Also, the things that I can do in a rehearsal room, in a singing lesson next to one I'm practicing, I often can't do them on stage in heat of the moment in front of people, and that sometimes irritates me. I think I could. This was so easy when I did it yesterday.
Yeah,
Up in beforehand, sing a phrase, and it just
yeah.
go out on stage. But I have at least come to terms with the fact that you can only do these things, practice these things on stage in front of an audience.
Because is it not to do with the presence of this infinitesimal amount of hormone called adrenaline? This tiny, tiny thing that changes the whole energy.
Yeah.
The energy is really what this is all about, isn't it? I think of nerves as nervous energy. I want my energy to be really ready for what I've got to do. I don't want to be feeling lackadaisical, you know. But some singers are different. I remember doing an incredibly wonderful, unforgettable performance with Mariella De Villa, the Italian bel canto singer. Okay, and this was several years ago. I think she's just about stopped. She was an incomparably good singer. And we were going to do this very demanding Donizetti opera in a concert in Festival Hall. And I went to wish her luck, and she came out of the dressing room and she said, "Maestro, I don't know. Do we have to do this tonight? I'm not feeling very much in the mood." She said, "No, I don't feel very, you know, I don't know whether do we have to do it?" I said, "Mariella, there's a lot of people out there. We're going to do it and we're going to have such a fun time." And she was unforgettable. It was so beautiful. So we all need some sort of nervous energy, don't we?
Yes, yes.
In order to keep going. And you're right, of course, when you feel, "Oh, I don't feel any nerves at all," it's dangerous.
Yeah.
Because this too much of the wrong sort of confidence can lead one astray.
Yeah, yes.
Now, Roddy, you've done an enormous amount of music in all different styles. I mean, you've done Bach, of course, Handel perhaps sometimes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. All through the 19th century. And we're going to do some Mahler, I hope. It's still there, you know.
Yes.
Just, when is it? Is it? Oh, yeah. Is it in November?
Yes, I believe so. The November dates are still there. The hesitation is the fact that, of course, emails come in daily with people saying, "I'm terribly sorry, this has gone," and others say, "We're hoping that this can happen," and you know. Yeah. So.
Well, I'm looking forward to it. Some lovely Mahler songs, but we've got to do something bigger. You know, as time goes on, all of us. I mean, we've got to reach back and bring this big emotion, because that's what people are very moved by, very excited. Yes. And I think we're going to have to wait some time to do that, aren't we?
Yes.
And this is very difficult because we don't want to lose everybody's commitment to live music. You know, live music is so much more valuable, isn't it, than listening to streaming or recorded music. They have their place, of course, without a doubt, but the live experience is the primary one.
Yeah.
And it's important to go on saying that, but for everybody to be patient until we can really do it justice again. Don't you think?
Absolutely. So for me, as a solo singer, it's easy for me to make chamber music, and it's easy for me to do ensemble stuff. You know, just very small numbers, and not for the first time. I think of orchestral players who have spent their lives concentrating and perfecting the art of playing together in large numbers. So even the music that has been produced by orchestras in isolation from their houses and assembled together by people, that's fun as far as it goes. But they are not making music together. We can see it. They're not making music together. So the whole raison d'être, everything they've trained for, as much training as I've done as a singer and more, is kind of left hanging, and that I feel particularly. Uh, it, I don't know. It's because the thing is, you stand in front of the orchestra as they play, and I often have the privilege of sitting beside you when it's not me singing, and I sit there in the well of this orchestra, and I wear it like a cloak. You know, this sound, all these people stretched out behind me. And you'll notice I love in rehearsal, I love turning around and facing them and singing to them for a bit and then turning up so we can do balance. But I love making music to them so that I can see how far they range on stage. As far as percussion, you sort of have to fax the percussion, if they've got and just all the double basses out by the wall, and just the range of people, all these people. We have some of the best players in the world in this country, and they're all trained to play together, and they can't. And I think that is hugely profound. And I just acknowledge that I can make music, and I have made music with one or two or three other people. I've been able to feed that urge in the last 2 months, and I can't wait to get to a situation where we can meet in proper large times, not just 30, but
60, 70.
Yeah.
Well, if it's any consolation, and it certainly has been for me, over the last days, I have actually started to make a CD with the London Philharmonic. And we've had, 50 players.
Yes.
String players, all wearing masks,
Yeah.
socially distanced. And it was quite tricky to begin with because, of course, nothing was together because so many people were so far from the leader,
Yes.
the leader of their section.
Yes.
And the hall were in Tesco's,
Yes.
So it was very difficult. But what was exciting, and it's important to say this, is that they found it. They found a way. It took perhaps half an hour before it started to settle down. And they realized how much they had to have courage and confidence to play and not wait.
Yes.
We've got some good takes, but it was with a wonderful soprano, Lisa Davidson.
Yes, fantastic. Lovely.
Yeah, she's wonderful. But listen, Roddy, we've covered a lot of different ground there. Are you working on anything at the minute, particularly? Are you working on writing a piece?
Yes, I am. I've got the couple of pieces that were due for premiere this summer. And of course, when the bottom fell out of that, and people were asking me to make quick arrangements immediately for various things, I had to put those on the back burner. So I can go back to them now that things have quietened down a bit. There's a choral piece and some songs, which is a sort of the Beethoven and die ferne Geliebte. We were wondering what the beloved far away on the other side of the valley. We wonder what she was thinking about this chap penning it. So we're working on that.
All right.
As it happens, I spent all of today, and just before I was on the call with you, I spent all today working on an arrangement for the lovely Nicky Spence of Teddy Bear's Picnic. He's got something he needs to film, and he said, Roddy, do you have an arrangement of Teddy Bear's Picnic? I said, leave it with me. I said, and so I've got all these Strauss and Mahler and Schubert and Schumann scores because I've begun to work in almost every single German romantic composer, song composer who's ever mentioned going into the woods. So I think I've.
Well, Sondheim wrote a musical about it, didn't he?
Yeah, he did.
But Roddy, as well, I shan't forget that we were supposed to play your orchestrations of the great Butterworth songs, the Shropshire Lad.
Yes.
And we've missed the opportunity, but we will find it again. And I look forward to that. You, me conducting your orchestrations, and it's going to be a wonderful Hallé concert there. Roddy, we could go on for hours, and it's so lovely of you to give the time. And on behalf of everybody, thank you. Thank you for what you do, what you actually believe in, and let's hope that your light will shine for many years yet.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you.